Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for a Learning and Growing webinar on everything I know about teaching I learned from Marvel Comics. Our presenter today is Tim Roberts of the University of Louisville. My name is Sidra, and I'm your moderator for Hawks Learning. We will have a live Q&A session after the presentation, so please enter any questions you have into the Q&A module as we go, and we'll answer them at the end. I'll now hand it over to our presenter.
Well, hi, everybody. Can you see me? Am I good, Cedra? Can you hear me and see me? Do I have everything turned on properly?
Yes, I can.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar on everything I know about teaching well. I learned from Marvel Comics. And I'm glad to see that we have quite a few people here. I say Bruce already has his hand raised. Is there a question? Cedra, do we go ahead and take question? Oh, okay. It looks like he put his hand down. All right. So I just need to know something. How many of you came in here because you're interested in the subject matter or because you like the picture of the dog with me? Because I've been told that anytime when I use that picture for a webinar or when I present anywhere that it's the dog that draws them in. That's my dog Ronnie. She's a beagle, and yes, she is that adorable. So yeah, both. Okay, thank you so much, Bruce. Bruce. So well, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So it's let me share my screen and we will get rolling. All right, here we go. Everything I know about teaching well, I learned from Marvel Comics, presented by me, otherwise known as Captain Adjunct. So here's, by the end of this session, this is what we will be able to do. We're going to see how cool comic books are. Of course, if you're here, you probably already know that, and how their stories can reflect our own experiences, so much so that they can inspire us to become better teachers and a little more attuned to the smarts and skills that students already bring to college, and for us to be their connection to a love of lifelong learning. That's going to be the theme here, connecting our students and bringing them into a love of lifelong learning. Some of them come in just thinking that this is what they're expected to do. We want to see some growth in them, I'm sure, and this is one of the areas to actually instill in them that love of lifelong learning. So a little bit about me. I started off my teaching career as a part-time lecturer at the University of Louisville from 1986 through 1989. And yes, this is me. This is when I won third place in the John Oates Mustache Lookalike Contest in this region. Yeah, I'm horribly unhappy looking person there. So, but few years later, I spent 30 years developing my superpowers, I guess you can call it that. I left teaching in 1991, and until just last year, I worked as a technical writer and an instructional media developer for some companies here you might have heard of. This one right here, Churchill Downs, it's a racetrack, a very famous racetrack. And this place, I think they have to do with chicken. This place, they build washers and dryers and so on and so forth. So, and I returned to teaching in 2015, and still, I kept myself had a little few side gigs with some of these folks, especially Little Brownie Bakers. I did work for them for about 3 years in a row. They're the company that make Girl Scout cookies, and I was a part of a team that developed online teaching videos for them. So since then, I've become a senior lecturer, dual credit instructor of English for U of L. And I also fill in some time as an adjunct instructor for Bellarmine University here in town and for the Louisville Extension campus for Campbellsville University. One thing that I like to accentuate in my teaching experience is that for 2 summers, I was a student services fellow and an instructor for what was called the Cadre and Faculty Development course it was a partnership with U of L and U.S. Army Cadet Command. It's where we taught new ROTC instructors how to teach. And I did that for 2 summers. And what was amazing about it is that what I learned during those 2 summers made me a more intentional teacher. I was before that just content to create a syllabus and follow it and do the best I can. But I found out that and something that I really had known all along but didn't put into practice, that teaching involves a lot of work. And I'm sure you realize that as well. But I found there's some books that I discovered and that I read and that I just immersed myself in. So that caused me to become a lot more intentional with the teaching that I do. So the background of this presentation actually has its root in Gerald Graff's article, Hidden Intellectualism. I use it in some of my classes. He's adapted it from his book Clueless and Academe. Now, that's cluelessness is not on the part of the students, but it's on the part of those who teach. And he calls it hidden intellectualism by other means. And this is one of the main ideas. This is what he claims. He said, we associate the life of the mind too narrowly and exclusively with subjects and texts that we consider inherently weighty and academic. It's the stuff we want them to learn about, but we don't exactly acknowledge the stuff that they already know. And we try to shoehorn largely what we think is weighty and academic, and they may not latch onto, and they may not exactly it may either turn them off or they may find it boring. But he furthermore states that they'd be more prone to taking on intellectual identities if we encourage them to do so at first on subjects that interest them rather than ones that interest us. And he gives several examples, not only in his in the article, but also in the book. For instance, if a student knows how to change oil in a car, okay, well, there you can have a student write a procedure paper on what are the steps to follow to when you change the oil. Okay, you can write that. You can do an analysis paper on how or not a process paper on how oil is refined to become the motor oil that you put in your car. It could also be there could be a chemistry paper on the makeup of oil. So there's all kinds of things that you could do with a student's interest. Now, combine this with something that I just recently found out in this book, The Years That Matter Most, How College Makes or Breaks Us by Paul Tough. This book is a chronicle of a group of students who, from the time they apply to college and with all those stresses that go along with that, to their first couple of years at university. And all of this happens, all of this is going on, all of this hidden intellectualism, and all of us trying to get them to consider stuff that we think might be a little more weighty and academic. It happens to these young people during a relatively brief period in late adolescence or their early adulthood. And the decisions that they make and the schools make can determine the course of their lives. So we're dealing with some largely young people who are incredibly stressed and just still trying to find a purpose for their own lives, a focus for their own lives. And this does have long-term ramifications. Many of the most fundamental questions about the kind of country that we'll become are playing out in the lives and decisions of our nation's college students. And these vast structural and economic forces meet with the fragile and unpredictable psyches of American 17 to 20-year-olds. So we've got volatility on one side and sort of an established intellectual rigidity on the other. And the two, when they clash, things don't look too good. So that's one of the things that we're trying to overcome. We're trying to meet the students where they currently are and take things from there. And this is our task in all of this. And this comes from Parker Palmer's The Courage to Teach. We want to introduce students to a world larger than their own experiences and egos. This is a world that expands their personal boundaries and enlarges their sense of community. We want them to experience intellectual, social, and personal growth. And this is what our task should be. And I'm not sure whether or not we're meeting that task. Even better, and this is something that I've added to my own teaching this year, we can be their junction to everywhere. Now, I know that sounds kind of cosmic and a little new agey, but bear with me on this. This panel over here, this comes from an issue of the Fantastic Four from way back in 1966, I think. And in it, Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, the guy with all the stretchy superpowers, has been experimenting with interdimensional transportation, and he into something called the negative zone. And this is where he finally does it. He's into a world of limitless dimensions, the crossroads of infinity, the junction to everywhere. What I'm striving for in my class is my general education classes is for the students to be just, I'm not just going to focus just on, college writing, but learning more about stuff other than just college writing. Try to broaden the scope of the class, because we discuss things such as emotional intelligence, and we look at that through how some characters in movies display emotional intelligence. We also, in my intermediate college writing classes, 102, the research-based classes, I get them to think about their careers 5 to 10 years outside of their college experience. Trying to link what we're doing to something bigger, making what we do the junction to everywhere. But one of the things that we don't do is that in order to meet students where they are, in order to be their junction to everywhere, in order to enlarge their sense of community, we don't dumb things down. We don't try to make things overly easy. Because I'll tell you why. This guy here, his name is George Lois. And this is an older picture of him. Handsome guy, isn't he? Kind of like me. No, just kidding. He is in the world of advertising. He is revered. He is a famous art director and creative director. Started off with the old ad agency, Doyle Dane Bernbach, and then with a couple of other guys created his own. He designed several of the covers of Esquire from the 1960s and 70s, but some of you of a certain age probably know his best advertising campaign. Back in the early 80s, a fledgling cable television channel had a hard time finding an audience. And then he was hired to try to get more people to subscribe. If I open up the chat, can anybody take a guess as to what the channel, what this particular channel is? You go ahead. I think the chat is open. If you want to go ahead and type something, see if you know what channel I'm talking about. TBS. Good. No, good guess, Bruce, but no. Believe it or not, it had a hard time finding NBC. No, NBC's been around for ages. HBO. Whoa, okay, Michelle's got it. MTV. Yes, he was the one responsible for the I Want My MTV advertising campaign. And it worked. It worked incredibly. So, but one thing that George said is, if you think people are dumb, you'll spend a lifetime doing dumb work. We don't want to dumb things down for our students so that they're insulted. But at the same time, we don't want to dumb things down so that everything we do is oversimplified and just becomes, unbearable. So if you think people are dumb, you'll spend a lifetime doing dumb work. But that's one thing we do not do. We maintain the intellectual standards, but we meet students where they are. So let's see. That's just an overview of where I'm coming from in this presentation. But let's see my Marvel experience. We're only talking about a short span of time, actually, from 1973 through 1976. And I stole this picture from somewhere on the internet. It was actually it was on Facebook, and I've borrowed it. I don't know who created it, so I can't properly cite the source. Um, so this is kind of like it as it was for me during those 3 years. Just uh, my bike wasn't it wasn't a Schwinn with the gear shift like this. I had a 10 speed. Um, I didn't like pop rocks. I didn't shop at 7-Eleven. I didn't get my comics at 7-Eleven. I got mine from an old school pharmacy here in Louisville, and just a couple of miles from where I lived. Old, and by old school, I mean you walked in. On the left was a soda fountain. There was a mosaic tile floor, and in the very back was where Mr. Cooper, Fee Cooper Drugstore, Mr. Kenneth Cooper, stood as the pharmacist, and was just that gorgeous deep wood cabinetry. Um, and of course, that was back when the pharmacist stood on a little platform and was elevated, and he could Mr. Cooper could tell why you were coming, why you had a prescription, because he could just diagnose you just by looking at you before you even handed the prescription over. Of course, I exaggerate, but he was well known in our area. But they had, I don't know who their magazine distributor was, but man, they always had the most recent comics. And sometimes twice a month they'd refill the spinner racks. And I was up there just about every week or every other week. And this was when comics were only a quarter. And I'd go up there with 75 cents or whatever, and get myself some comics. So and that was of course I didn't have the Marvel Superhero Cup, and this with the Star Wars T-shirt. I was 16 years old when Star Wars came out in 1977, so and I was past my comic reading days. Um, but yeah, it was that legitimately undisguised joy, love coming home with a stack of comic books. But and it's it wasn't just I didn't waste my time reading these things, because they taught me several things. One thing, they taught me about context and reference. If there's one thing that Marvel was known for, is that a lot of its storylines, if not all of its storylines, were all interconnected. And we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. And that a character would probably say something, and there'd be a little asterisk, and you'd look down at the bottom of the panel and it would say, see Defenders number whatever, and it would refer to another storyline in another book. And and that was throughout every single issue. It showed how interconnected all these stories were, and that if you wanted to find out what happened, you would have to find that issue. Back then, we didn't have dedicated comic book stores, and we didn't have anything online, clearly. But you either had to find a friend who had the issue, or you had to wait until a comic book convention rolled around. We did have those, so that you could find that issue and you could buy it. So that's one thing that it taught me: context and reference. Of course, plot and subplot, which helped me greatly in high school literature classes, because there were sometimes in these in one story arc that would sometimes go on for issue after issue after issue. There was a plot, and of course, there was also a subplot. Maybe that subplot was tied into something that went on in another comic book. Structure and organization, big part of that. That fed into my career as a technical writer. How to present something logically, how to present a storyline logically, and how to present an organized story, so that you didn't get too lost. Keeping an audience's attention, yeah, that's a big part of any type of comic book. And it also taught dialogue and spelling. Oh yes, I learned most of my. I was always a good speller, but I learned to spell a few more complicated words by reading Marvel comics. Oh, and I learned how to spell yeah correctly, YEAH, not YEA, but yeah, YEAH. So if I took nothing away from comic books, it's yeah, I learned how to spell. I've got somebody who raised a hand. Who is it? Diana? Do you have a question?
I believe it's Cynthia had a question, has her hand raised.
Okay. Who is it?
If you can go ahead and put your question in the chat box, we
Yeah,
can
put the question in the
get an
chat
answer.
box. Mhm. Okay. Well, should I go ahead and move on, and then I'll just answer her question when I see it?
I think that sounds good.
Okay, let's just go ahead and move on. All right, let's see. Now, here are the 5 things that we're going to discuss in this. Now that I provided my own personal background and the background of, well, actually the root of this presentation. Um, these are the 5 things that I learned um, from reading Marvel Comics and that I apply as a teacher. Finding your way out of confusion can be fun, okay? Or at least should be less confusing. Sometimes you have to reuse material as teachers. We know that to be true. um, what else I got here? Have a hype machine for your class. Get your students interested in the class itself and the material that you're going to discuss. Sometimes a no prize is the best prize. That's where I'll talk about extra credit. And I save the big lesson for last. With great power, and of course we can finish that. With great power comes great responsibility. So let's go ahead and start with number 5. Finding your way out of confusion can be fun, or should be less frustrating. Okay, now last Christmas, my wife gave me this book, All of the Marvels. Now it's not a comprehensive reference on every single issue of that Marvel published from 1961 on. But the author, Douglas Wolk, did read 27,000 Marvel comics and just kept a spreadsheet and find out which story was um, uh, which was connected to each and the others, and it's just overwhelming. But what he does in this is he takes the main characters and highlights several issues that contain important storylines, important story development, or important character development. And again, that runs from 1961 up through 2017, where he finally had to call a halt and then start writing his book. So, as I said, he read 27,000 Marvel comics, starting with Fantastic Four #1 from August 1961, the very month and year that I was born. So I am the same age as the Fantastic Four. So, and he calls that a rocket flight gone wrong. And that's true. That's how it starts. The 4 characters, Reed Richards, his fiancee Sue Storm, her brother Johnny Storm, and Reed's friend Ben Grimm, steal a rocket, fly off into space, get bombarded with cosmic rays, and the rocket has to make a crash landing. And when the crash lands, they all 4 find that they have various superpowers. And he considers all these issues, all 27,000 Marvel comics, he considers it to be the largest interconnected story ever told. And he's right. And I gave you the examples of the stuff that I saw during those, those 3 brief years back in the early to mid 1970s, how much of the stuff is interconnected, and how you can easily, if you're not paying attention, you can get lost, but you can easily find your way back through. But the question that we have to ask is, for higher education, where is the entry point? Because ideally, any Marvel comic can be your entry point into the largest interconnected story ever told. But for us, where is our entry point? So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to do one of the things that Marvel was fantastic at doing, and that is summarizing previous storylines. And the example I'm going to use comes from an issue of Captain Marvel from the 1974, I think. issue number 33. Now, of course, this is Thanos. And if you remember anything from the Avengers movies from a few years ago, he's the number one bad guy. He's the one who stole the Infinity Stones to form the Infinity Gauntlet. But what impressed me most about this issue is just this 2-page spread that summarized the birth of Thanos, how he came to power, but it also integrated the several of the previous issues of Captain Marvel, and of course brought in an issue of the Fantastic Four. So that's one thing that Marvel did very well. To find your way out of confusion, they would provide these deep summaries like this. 2-page spread, and you after that you were all caught up. So what I hope to do is something very similar with this, so that we can dive deep into this whole thing about finding your way out of confusion and how it's related to the issues that I described, that Gerald Graff described, that we need to meet students where they are. So there's a tension between what we expect and the methods we use to facilitate our expectations and students' abilities. And Gerald Graff calls this his volleyball effect. So we've got this tension going on. It's what we're expecting, the methods we're using to communicate our expectations and facilitate those, and what the students are what they actually can do, or what they're actually interested in. And the volleyball effect works like this. Students get, like a volleyball, they get batted around between incompatible but non-communicating assumptions and views. And these go between the various classes that they're taking. I think on average, a freshman student, first-year student takes about maybe 15 hours or so. And that's what 5 classes, if my math is correct. And they might get differing perspectives, differing ways of teaching, which is natural. But they might they're getting different perspectives, and they've got sometimes it's hard for them to keep all this organized. They experience our curriculum as a disconnected series of courses that convey wildly mixed messages. But I'm thinking more along the lines this way. I'm calling this, he has the volleyball effect. I'm giving it my own name. It's the Marvel-less effect. Yes, I know I'm bad at coming up with names like this. So let's just call it the Marvel-less effect. So for me, it's as if each of us is creating our own comic book of the same character that really doesn't sync with the others, with the other comics being published at the same time. Or we're also creating books of our own characters with no hope of connecting the stories. We're not, things are just existing on their own. They're existing in silos. And I know in higher education, there are these various fiefdoms. The College of Education doesn't talk with the College of Arts and Sciences, doesn't talk with the College of Business, doesn't talk with, so on. Everything can be isolated, siloed. And of course, we've got students going from us to another class, and there's a lot of inconsistency as to about expectations. There's a lot of inconsistency as to some of the ideas that are communicated, and even the way that some instructors lecture. So everything is just isolated, and it's not connected. And that's how they experience. That's how these young folks experience college. Some of them just go through. They just go, okay, I've got this class, got this class, got this class. But I think we could probably do something better. So let's see what we can do. Solutions. Okay. According to Graff, we are in a system where students' cluelessness about academia is rooted in our cluelessness about each other. Folks, we don't talk to each other at all. If we do, it's only just as friends, and we don't really discuss stuff that's going on and how we can help each other and how we can serve each other. I experienced that a couple of years ago. I subscribe to the AAUP, American Association of University Professors listserv. I'm not a member, but we get the news, and we share they share each other's they share information on this listserv. And I don't remember exactly what the issue was, but somebody suggested, well, we need to check with an education lawyer in the U.S. Department of Education to find a solution. And somebody replied with, well, maybe we should check with our own law school. And then somebody said, would reply, I agree. We need to check with somebody in our law school. Another email message. Well, who in the law school is an education lawyer? We don't know. And it went round and round and round like that. And they were starting to hyperventilate, literally, about the inability to find a solution. Now, my work with the cadre and faculty development course through U of L's College of Education, I met Dr. Jeff's son, who is he was in charge of that program, but he's also an attorney. He has a PhD in educational leadership, and he has a law degree. He's a specialist in education law. So I just casually suggest, has anybody considered contacting Jeff's son over in the College of Education? And it's as if the clouds parted and the rays of light just descended, and you heard these angel voices singing. So I don't know if they contacted him or not. I still, if they did, I probably owe him an apology for just throwing his name out without giving him a heads up. But we have no clue as to who, what others in these other units, what they do. Again, and it's we need more interconnection with each other, I think. And it's not just bumping into each other at the campus Starbucks or the campus coffee shop or the campus malt shop or whatever it is that you have. One thing that I'm going to do in my English 102 class next semester is I'm actually going to bring in somebody from the career development office, because the assignment that my students work on is a semester-long research project on an issue in their intended career or their field of study. And I also want to bring in people, professors from these other departments, somebody from education to talk to my students who are going into teaching, or just to address the class and just tell what they're going through and what their experience is like. Somebody from social work, somebody from the College of Business. That's going to be my goal for this next semester in English 102, and that's going to help it's going to introduce the students to more than just one department and more than just one instructor, and more cross-listing of courses. I don't see that too much anymore. It might be different at your universities, but all the courses seem to be strictly locked into whatever departments they're part of. For example, in the English department at U of L, we have a business writing class, which I've taught. But our College of Business has a business communications class. And I talked with that instructor one time. So what kind of stuff are you teaching them? So, well, we're teaching them how to develop a career portfolio. Okay, that's one of the things that we do. We're teaching them how to do proposals. Okay, that's one of the things that we do. And I don't know why they couldn't be cross-listed. And they also teach how to do an effective presentation, which is something that not all of us do, but some of us do. So that's just one example. Cross-listing of courses, and of course, interconnection of student learning outcomes. I know that for some of us, or if it's at some of our institutions, students, first-year students take a beginning, an introduction to our college writing class, but they also probably take an introduction to public speaking. Why not have similar student learning outcomes for both? Because they involve using, one just is speaking, the other is writing, but they also involve organization. They also involve various types of speaking or writing, persuasion, motivation, instructional, and so forth. I'm just wondering why we can't just connect, student learning outcomes for classes like that. And one more thing, another big solution, find out what students already know and what they want to know. One of the books that influenced me, it's one of the books I got when I was with CFDC, was James Lang's Small Teaching. And he says that just this small action can help you recognize mistaken perceptions that the students have. But it will also activate whatever knowledge they currently have that you want to build on or reinforce. Just a couple of months ago, within my own department, we had our orientation meetings for the year. And this one instructor said, I want to teach. I want to teach what rhetoric is, but I have no idea if they know anything. I don't know what they don't know. And I said, well, why don't you just ask? And that just made so much sense to him. So, and that's is fine. Just find out what they already know and build upon that. Or if they know is not quite not quite on the beam, then you can just teach to adjust that. So finding your way out of the confusion, there are a number of solutions to that to help students navigate this world of academe better. So, and again, I asked the question that I asked at the beginning: where is the entry point for all of this? It should be anywhere. It should be us. Any one of us can be the entry point into this love of lifelong learning. We can, each one of us can be students' first issue of Captain America, or first issue of Black Panther, or first issue of Hulk. Because you don't have to start at the very beginning in the Marvel universe. You don't have to go to Hulk #1 in order to know the story. Any issue at any time can introduce you to that entire interconnected storyline. So any one of us should be that a student's connection into that love of lifelong learning. Okay, so we good? So any questions so far? Anything you want to mention in the chat, or just want to hold off on everything till the end? So we all good? All right. Well, this is something you probably already know. Sometimes you have to reuse material. Now, Marvel is very good at this. Captain America, that's the very first issue from March 1941. Marvel Comics, actually, from 1939. And Tales to Astonish. Of course, Captain America introduced us to the character Captain America. The first issue of what was called Marvel Comics introduced us to the Human Torch, who was actually an android, not a real person. And then Groot. Groot started off as a monster. But of course, later on, Marvel reused these old characters. Captain America was brought back in the Avengers with a storyline that he had been frozen in a state of suspended and literally frozen in ice in a state of suspended animation until the Avengers found him. And of course, Human Torch was revived with the very first issue of the Fantastic Four. And Groot went from being a monster to being one of the Guardians of the Galaxy. So you see, they're excellent at reusing material. The trick, though, becomes making the reused material more challenging, no matter if you're teaching one course or the next, and you have to reuse the material. Yeah, funny that Heather says, funny that the last author, James Lang, shares a name with Ant-Man. Yeah, Scott Lang. That's cool. So make the reused material more challenging. Now, I mentioned Captain America, very first issue. When he's brought back in 1964. Well, in the 1970s, Cap undergoes an identity crisis, pretty severe identity crisis, because you consider that at the same time, this is when Watergate was unfolding. And he's just really not sure this is the America that I want to represent. Am I, do I represent the government? Do I represent the people? What do I represent? He had also been accused of murder, from which he was later exonerated. And he's just going through a lot. So he quits. He just gives up the identity. And of course, that presents a big challenge. What do we do without Captain America? What happens? He just, he literally, he throws the identity away and doesn't want to be anything anymore. He just wants to be Steve Rogers. But of course, he comes back a few issues later. He's got to. He's Captain America. But it did, it was extremely complex at the time, politically complex at the time, because as I said, these were the days of Watergate. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, this guy, it's starting to challenge my own young perceptions of what this nation is and what's actually going on. So make the reuse material a little more challenging. Actually, I reused some material for this presentation. You remember this slide? My buddy George Lois here. If you think people are dumb, you'll spend a lifetime doing dumb work. Well, that actually comes from a presentation that I did on what a technical writer can teach you about assignment design. And this is that slide. The very same quotation, but used in a different context, where you respect the subject and the audience. So am I meeting with all kinds of oohs and ahs of being impressed? And okay, well, nobody's saying that in the chat, so just go on. So this is, and I do this with almost every presentation that I create, not just for webinars like this, but for stuff that I use in my classes. You can use anything in any class as long as you adapt it to the purpose that you have. Okay. So, this is always fun. Have a hype machine for your class. Now, every issue of every Marvel comic back then, I don't remember when they stopped doing this, but there was one page called the Marvel Bullpen Bulletins. And this is where you caught up with all the news, all the stuff that was going on, all the forthcoming issues, all the people who have been added to all the new artists, any new characters coming along. And in every Marvel Bullpen Bulletin, there was this yellow rectangle, Stan Lee's soapbox, where he would say a few words about the state of the comics industry or stuff that was going on at Marvel, or he might even comment on a social issue. So you could always count on something fun to read there. So, but what I do, you notice how each one of these is set off with an item. And each one of the items is it's about something going on in the Marvel universe. And of course, there was always the checklist at the end, upcoming issues. So I sort of stole that. And every week, I send it out on Sunday evening. I have course news, and I give the week, and I say the week that they're on. And I do the same thing that the Bullpen Bulletins did. Every item gets item with a big quotation. I'm sorry, what's that called? Exclamation mark. And for one thing, it serves two purposes. One, it gives the students a preview of what's coming up for the week, maybe anything that's going to be due, anything that's going to be discussed. But it also helps me with what I'm going to present for the week, so that I don't lose track of things. And of course, yeah, I tell a really, really bad joke at the beginning of this one. Where does Quasimodo raise his rabbits? In the Hunchback of Notre Dame. No response on that one. Okay, let's move on. So this is what a hype machine can do for your class. This is a weekly communication, whether it's an announcement or an email blast. It shows excitement for the material and the class. It shows that you're excited about it, and that excitement can possibly be transmitted to the students. And it makes them feel their being in class has a value, and that they're valued, that I am taking enough time at the end of at the beginning of the week to communicate with them. Okay, this is what's going on. This is what you'll need to, this is what we're going to be working on. This is the stuff that's coming due. Just sending you out this reminder. I value your input into the class. If you have any questions, I value the work that you're doing. It's a big help with that. Okay. Sometimes a no prize is the best prize. And this is where we talk about extra credit. Now, Marvel used to have this. It's actually started off when there were only, I think, 4 artists, and this was in the 60s. 4 artists: Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, um, uh, Don Heck, and Dick Ayers, I think, was another one. There were basically 4 artists handling more than 3 dozen comics, and that's not just the main, not just the main characters, but some of the also some of the smaller books. And with all of this going on, and Stan Lee was writing a lot of them. And with all this stuff, sometimes mistakes would be made. Sometimes something would break continuity. And a sharp-eyed reader would catch that and say, well, okay, well, and send in a letter. Okay, well, what's going on? I mean, I remember this from the last issue, but all of a sudden it's this now. Well, why in the previous issue is Captain America descending on a parachute, and then he begins the next issue and the parachute's gone? I mean, what happened? So when enough people would write and point these things out, they would expect a prize of some kind. Can you give me some kind of acknowledgement? Do you have some old comics laying around you can send me? Well, it kind of put Stan Lee in a little bit of a pickle, and so he said, "Well, when is a prize not a prize? When it's a no prize." And what he did was he would send out, if someone caught an inconsistency and wrote, and the letter was published, he would send what was called the no prize, and all it was this envelope with nothing in it. And it wasn't done as a cruel gag or a cruel prank, because if you got one of these, you were something special. And it was awesome. It meant that they acknowledged what you did, that you caught an error, you pointed it out, and the best thing, and you got an empty envelope, but it came from Marvel. So it was just the greatest thing. And I got some of these. Sometimes I think I've seen these things on eBay going for $1,000 easily, and it's just an empty envelope, but there was just so much value ascribed to it, because it meant that you saw something that was wrong in the comic, you wrote to them, they published your letter, and they sent this to you. Your input was valuable. So I kind of think of extra credit that way. For me, no prize extra credit means okay. One thing I don't. They always ask what's your extra credit policy, and I say, well, it's when is extra credit not extra credit? When it's no extra credit. And I don't I don't give extra credit, or I don't allow extra credit, because for me, to do so, it discourages, but no extra credit actually encourages. I'm sorry, it encourages the best work possible. And that's what I tell them. I said, you do the best work that if you do your best work possible, if you do that and you do it consistently, there's no reason to get extra credit. It discourages last minute grade boosts. If a student comes and says, I've got an 89.9% in this class and I need 90 point even to get an A, what extra credit can I do? And you know how that is. But it discourages that last minute grade boost that so many students ask for. And it emphasizes the value of the work that they do. That way, if it's good, if it's consistent, there's no need for extra credit. So finally, with great power, and of course we can complete that, with great power comes great responsibility. That comes from, of course, the very first Spider-Man story told in Amazing Fantasy, which later changed its name to Amazing Adult Fantasy, because it was the magazine that respected your intelligence. So you probably are familiar with the origin of Spider-Man. A teenage boy is bitten by a spider that is exposed to radioactivity, and he suddenly has these powers. He has the ability to climb walls, and he has the strength of a spider, the speed of a spider. Then he develops the formula for webs and a way to spin them, a way to shoot them. Well, what you probably aren't familiar with is that he actually started out as a television star, and these pages come from that first story. And of course, he amazes people with with these powers, and he becomes quite popular. Well, one time he's leaving the studio, and this guy runs down the hall. He's stolen something from another office, and Spider-Man just steps aside and lets him go, lets him go down the elevator. And Spidey says to the security guard, says, "Listen, I'm looking out for myself right now. I don't care about this. I didn't have to stop him. I'm just looking out for myself right now." And he's with all this money he's making as a star, he's helping his Uncle Ben and his Aunt May. He cares most about them, and as he says in the one of these panels, the rest of the world can go hang as far as I'm concerned, because I'm just focusing on making them happy. But well, sadly, he comes home from a TV appearance one night and finds police cars outside his house. And he finds out from a police officer that his Uncle Ben surprised a burglar, and the burglar shot and killed his Uncle Ben. He finds out where they have this assailant trapped, and Spider-Man goes there. Finds out that the guy was the one that he let slip past the security guards earlier. The guy he could have stopped is the guy who killed his Uncle Ben. And at the very end, he realizes that. And that's one of the sad things about the origin of Spider-Man. At the end of the first Fantastic Four, they defeat the Mole Men. At the end of the first issue of The Incredible Hulk, he defeats a Soviet scientist called the Gargoyle. The first issue of Thor the first story of Thor in Journey into Mystery, he defeats the Stone Men of Saturn. The first issue of Iron Man, he escapes from the North Vietnamese. But in the first story of Spider-Man, he realizes he could have prevented his uncle's murder. And he carries that with him. And this is when he has that realization that with great power, there must also come great responsibility. I use that as a lead into this story. A couple of years ago, I was down in the area where the adjunct instructors have their offices, and one of the other adjuncts came in. He was a younger guy. He came in pretty flustered, and he said, "I just had a student. We were reading an article about fake news. I think the article was something from the Atlantic that he passed around." And we were talking about source credibility, and this kid said that he didn't think the story was credible, and he didn't think the author was credible. I mean, how do you handle that? He was really flustered. Now, one of the other instructors said this. He said, "Make the kid want to drop." I wouldn't put up with that shit for a minute. Pardon the language. And that wasn't the worst part of it. The worst part was that there was just sudden pile on with all these others who were in the room. One of them said he was a woman who she had retired from the university a couple of years prior and then came back as an adjunct. She said, "What is this kid, homeschooled?" And I took personal offense to that because primarily, I had two students. They were brothers, ages 15 and 13, taking my English 101 and 102 classes. They were homeschooled. And somebody else said, and they started actually coming up with ideas to make this kid want to drop. And they were, just seconds away from running out and finding a whiteboard that they could pull into the class and, and maybe brainstorm some ideas how to get this kid to drop. Someone else who he was an older adjunct who said, "Well, I had a professor who used to, if he wanted to make you drop, he'd give you a 300-page book and tell you to have it summarized by the end of the week and have the summary on his desk." And it wasn't so, again, it wasn't so much what the other instructor said, but just that this pile on. And this, with this this attitude, I'm thinking this, you could, that we could make our students' lives miserable and make them want to drop. We could focus our ire on the one student that makes us, upset, and we could actually do that. But there'd be all kinds of problems, because if a student ever feels marginalized, if a student ever feels picked on, all he's got to do is go to the dean of students or whatever equivalent office there is at your university and make a complaint. But the idea that this is even considered is mind-boggling. And with this great power that we do have over the lives of these young people, we've got a great responsibility. And just because we can do it doesn't mean that we should. Now, I know some of us are parents, some of us have children, and some of us, we get frustrated with them, and we get frustrated with the students as well. But we've also got that responsibility. We've got that responsibility to help them learn. We've got that responsibility to provide that junction to everywhere. So, and that's a responsibility that we need to take seriously. So, I've got some final thoughts here. I like to think of us less as teachers and more like ambassadors of higher education. We represent to these people what higher education is. We connect with students and invite them into a love of lifelong learning. And we provide that environment that promotes lifelong learning. We add value to the material that we teach. We consider this too. Marvel is a 60-year-old epic story, well, now 61-year-old epic story, that has multiple entry points. As I said, any issue at any time can be your entryway into this large interconnected story. Now, higher ed is a 1,000 plus year old epic story with just one entry point, and that is when the student gets admitted to college. Now, we need to be the entry points, I think, into the love of lifelong learning. And as I mentioned earlier, we need to be somebody's first issue of something. We need to be their first issue of the first issue they open of Captain America, or of Black Panther, or Thor, or She-Hulk, any of those. So the question is, where and how are we meeting students to draw them into our epic story? Where are we meeting them to draw them into that love of lifelong learning? And I close with that one word so familiar to fans of Marvel's: Excelsior, to the highest. And there's my email address if you want to get a hold of me. So that's it for the formal part of the presentation. Thoughts, questions?
If you guys would like to go ahead and drop your questions in the chat or in the Q&A module, either would be okay.
All right.
We have a few minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Well, thank you too. You're welcome. Oh, well, I'm glad. Thank you, Heather. Awesome. Oh, thank you, Bruce. You're welcome, Pam. Roland.
All right, if there
Okay.
are no other questions, let's go ahead and close out.
Okay. I'll stop my share.
Thank you so much.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Tim, for your presentation. It was a wonderful presentation, and thank you all for attending today.
Okay.
If you or any of your fellow instructors are interested in presenting for our Learning and Growing webinar series, please submit your proposals to the Learning and Growing website, which I'm going to go ahead and link in the chat right now for easy reference.
Mhm.
All right, and we will be emailing you a link to the recording of this webinar once it becomes available so you guys can review all of the great information that we learned today.
Mhm.
Um, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Okay.
Thank you.
Enjoy your weekend.
You as well. Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks. Yeah, got to go get our cat had his he had to be neutered today, so we got to go pick
Oh,
him up.
maybe he gets an extra can of tuna for today.
Well, or a can of something if he
Something.
feels like eating. All right. So nothing else then?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. All right.
Well, thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. Thank you, Sidra. Y'all take care.
Have a good one.
Bye bye.
Bye.